Hello everyone, McGee here again with another draft battle analysis video and recap of my week 4 match against PokeFan in the XPDLA. I am looking to go 4-0 and get a continued strong start in the Flare division. And so I'm facing PokeFan, who has made recent changes to his roster to overhaul. And so I'm trying to kind of scout out his new play style and get a sense of what he's trying to accomplish with some of these changes while still playing to my win conditions. But before we get into the match, we're going to take a look at the team he had available to him and then look at the team that I brought to address as many things as possible. So some of his best pieces on his team, obviously Mew, Clefable, two huge wild cards that can be very offensive or very supportive depending on the needs. Melmetal, which is just a really good wall breaker, has some options with sub and toxic stall to deal with as well. Hydreigon, which was a concern for its ability to go again physical or special, or even mixed, because a mixed set could really address things like my Blissey Skarmory core. Mega Heracross, which as an adamant nature was capable of two-hit KOing my Skarmory, and so that was always a huge concern as something that could just start breaking my team open as the match went on. Milotic, which is a very difficult mon for me to KO. I've got Rotom Heat as an electric type, but he's got that fire typing as well, so it's kind of dangerous to use him against the Melodic. And then Shaymin, who is a very solid grass type with a really, really great special move. Gengar, mostly concerned about it for its ability to use Destiny Bond, just because Alolan Muck has no problem at all 1v1 in Gengar, but we need Alolan Muck for other things in this match. Things like Mew, things like Clefable, things like Hydreigon. So we don't want to lose Muck trying to sack a Gengar, but otherwise Gengar wasn't a concern for any sort of offensive presence, just its ability to take Muck to the grave with it. And then some additional pieces at the bottom of his team that were of less concern. Things like Stunfisk could do some damage, but it doesn't really have that great of a stat line. I have lots of ways to hit it really hard. Komala, decent stat line, but again, it just doesn't really have a way to break Skarmory, so I'm not worried about it. And then Exeggutor, it has a couple interesting things it can do, but its speed tier and the way it's split between physical and special attack just kind of make it an unreliable wall breaker, even though it might be able to hit something like Blissey hard with a physical attack. It just doesn't really have a strong enough stat line to really break me. So that wasn't something I was worried about coming into this. Most of my concern came on addressing the versatility of Mew and Clefable, being able to break Milotic, because if I couldn't break Milotic, I lose the game, and then being able to manage the offensive presence of Melmetal and Mega Heracross. And so that's kind of how I built around in this team. So something I did bring, and I have before, I haven't gotten to use it yet, is the substitute Will-O-Wisp Hex Dragapult. Speed investment to outspeed max speed Mew, and then really just the rest put in special attack, and then giving him some decent bulk so that he can get behind a sub. Start wisping things I'm really concerned about. So things like Mega Heracross, if I could burn that, no longer a problem for me anymore. And then Hex just starts demolishing a lot of things once they're burnt. This kind of lets Dragapult have a little more mobility in the game because he can force a lot of things out, but often the thing that's going to come in is Clefable. So if I can get behind a sub, I can at least start doing chip damage to Clefable, trying to create a situation where Dragapult can come in and get a KO eventually, and then start doing more offensive things. But even just his ability to burn was just really, really valuable in this game because I was always very worried about a Mega Heracross just getting too strong and tearing through me. Diancie, really wasn't sure what to do with Diancie all that much this week. I really only needed Moonblast and Earth Power. That hit everything as well it was going to hit. I didn't have a coverage move to hit Clefable harder. Hidden Power Steel, Hidden Power Poison, both of those are weaker than Moonblast. There's no real value in running those to try to hit Clefable for super effective damage. It was just Moonblast and Earth Power just the ways to go. But the issue was I couldn't break Milotic reliably unless I started boosting, and so I focused on having a Calm Mind so that if I had that plus some Draining Kissing, I could get some of my bulk back up and stay alive while also being able to break some of the walls that he might have to work with, specifically Clefable and Milotic, because those are always going to be difficult for me to break. Speed investment is just maxed out so that we can, or not, sorry, not maxed out. Yeah, it's maxed out to address, I believe it was his Gengars because we sped tie, and if it wasn't sashed, I wanted to be able to reliably kill it with Earth Power, and so max speed was necessary to ensure that. Skarmory, all the way to the max with its defense stat, it needed to be able to have the best chance possible to be in 3-hit KO range for Mega Heracross so that I could have a switch in and try roosting and getting my health back and staying alive, or going for the Suicide Brave Bird on it. Because Skarmory's one job in this match is pretty much to ensure that the Mega Heracross doesn't take off and start breaking his team. He to an extent manages Melmetal, but Melmetal has things like Discharge and superpower that can threaten to break me. I have a problem dealing with Melmetal behind a sub, so it wasn't the best answer to Melmetal, despite its defensive bulk, just because Melmetal has ways to work around that. But if I could break the Mega Heracross with Skarmory and prevent it from terrorizing my team, then that was great value from Skarmory. Gastrodon, really, Gastrodon's primary purpose in this match is just managing the Melmetal, making sure it gets punished for clicking double Iron Bash. Enough investment so that I'm always out of 2-hit KO range, except for, I think, a very strong Bandit set. I just couldn't reliably get invested to that point. So this is ways around that. And a Bandit set wasn't very good because a Bandit Thunder Punch was just going to struggle to 2-hit KO Skarmory anyway. So it just wasn't a very valuable set for him to run. So that wasn't something I was overly worried about. But I was aware that it could break Gastrodon if that's what he ran. So Gastrodon is just kind of there to make sure Melmetal gets punished for using its double Iron Bash, taking away its ability to click Thunder Punch, and then forcing it into moves like Earthquake and Superpower, which I have immunities to, so I can get around that. Recover, Toxic, Earth Power, Mirror Coat. Earth Power obviously to hit Melmetal hard and make sure it can't do anything. Toxic for predictive switches into things like Milotic or Hydreigon or anything that might threaten to push through my Gastrodon. Earth Power, or I'm sorry, Mirror Coat, just because I was, if I didn't need him anymore in the game, if Melmetal wasn't there or he had addressed Melmetal, there was a lot of special attackers I would like to be able to hit back hard with a Mirror Coat, just because it had a decent enough bulk, it could probably take a hit or two for most of them and just push some damage back onto them hard if it came to that. So I wanted to be able to take advantage of that Mirror Coat if necessary. Muck running, again, a very similar set to what he's been running all season, very heavily HP invested, mostly into his attack, and then Spadef with an Assault Vest. Because, again, we're concerned about a couple of things on his team, namely Hydreigon, namely Gengar, as being special attacking options we are going to have trouble breaking. But Alola Muck has a really good uh, coverage moves here because it hits Mew hard, it hits Clefable hard. It's one of my best pieces to hit Clefable for really hard damage because Clefable, if it had gotten going with things like Cosmic Power, something like that, that gets its stat line up, it becomes this impossible wall to break. So having something that could always do more than 70% reliably when it came in at it was of extreme value. And so I wanted to make sure he was able to do that. So that's why we ran Gunk Shot this week over Poison Jab, even though Poison Jab is just more likely to generate status. It doesn't really matter if Clefable's running Magic Guard. So we want to make sure we can hit Clefable really hard so that it can't get going. And then, knock off, just take off items, get clean KOs. Pursuit, if I was confident Gengar wasn't going to Destiny Bond, I was always willing to use Pursuit on it. Same with the Mew, just to go really good chip and punish them for switching around. And then Brick Break, just to get some decent coverage moves. It hits a decent, it does for an okay amount on Melmetal. It'll hurt Hydreigon, even though Poison Jab or Gunk Shot's probably better, it's just not as reliable. And then it hits things like Komala for some decent chunk as well. And then finally, rounding out the team, Shaymin has just the right amount of coverage moves for this match, and then Choice Spec Seed Flare just obliterates a lot of his team, pretty much unless they're specifically fully invested in their special defense. Choice Spec Seed Flare, if I get the Spadef drop on the first hit from it, everything will be 2-hit KO'd. So it's just something that he doesn't have an ability to switch into if he needs to run away. So if this comes in front of something like Milotic, it just spams Seed Flare and he doesn't have a switch in. So as long as I'm not missing attacks, things just start breaking and falling apart and dying. Regardless of whether they resist or not, even Melmetal, if it's not overly defensive, it can easily be 2-hit KO by Seed Flare if the first one generates a Spadef drop. additional coverage moves like Air Slash, again, specifically to be able to one-hit KO Mega Heracross so it couldn't get going and doing anything scary. Dazzling Gleam, pretty much specifically for Hydreigon, just to make sure I had a really strong fairy answer outside of Mega Diancie, just because if Hydreigon runs a Scarf and it uses Flash Cannon, Diancie goes down. So I wanted to have a way to be able to survive any one attack that Hydreigon wanted to do and always be able to ensure I could 1-hit KO back on a Scarf set. And so Dazzling Gleam was a really good answer to that. And then finally, Earth Power, just so it had a way to hit Gengar for good damage. Because if Gengar could come in on most of the attacks and resist them really well, but if it came in on an Earth Power, it eats a bunch of damage. It might even with specs, it probably is at range to be 1-hit KO just because it doesn't have a lot of bulk. And so Earth Power is just a really good finishing coverage move. Max speed investment because we're a mythical, and so we're speed tight with the Mew, and so we want to make sure we are at least on coin flips every time we're coming across the Mew. So that's the team. That's kind of what I put together. That was the general game plan for everything. And then so we're going to go into this match a little bit, break it down, break out, talk about some of the things I was surprised about, namely that there is no Melmetal here. Hydreigon always seemed like it may not come. It didn't have a great matchup. It's slower than Dragapult, so it kind of gets forced into the Scarf. It has a hard time dealing with Muck. Blissey, if it's there, just really walls it out really well. I don't bring Blissey this week. So all in all, Hydreigon really didn't have a matchup it liked, and so it made perfect sense that it got left behind. Komala wasn't the expected mon to show up over Hydreigon and Melmetal. It has a very interesting thing it's trying to do in this match to address both Mega Diancie and Dragapult, but it was a bit of a surprise appearance. The rest of his team made perfect sense. We knew that Mega Heracross was going to be there. Mew obviously was going to be there. Clefable really wanted to be there. Milotic wanted to be there. And then because the Gengar was there and because I had been had my Muck destroyed by a counter the previous week, I was very wary that the Gengar was there to specifically try to take Muck to the grave with it because Muck threatened his Mew a lot. It threatened his Clefable a lot. Komala doesn't really want to 1v1 it. So to me, it seemed like this Gengar was here to specifically ensure that Alolan Muck died so the game was more open to him. But my goal from turn one is to just start breaking things. Mew is a really safe lead off a lot of the time. Clefable is a really safe lead off a lot of the time for him in most matches. So I'm just going to go straight in with my Shaymin to try to see if I can get a chance to break those things. But unfortunately for me, he leads the Gengar. This is not a good 1v1 for Shaymin, so I'm going to be forced straight out into my best answer to Gengar, which is Alolan Muck. So no reason to do any risky plays there. Might as well come in with my best option to address that because we don't know what Gengar is going to do. I see substitute Black Sludge, and so that caught me a little off guard. I thought it might be a Sash set or something like that, just to really punish Muck for attacking it on a pursuit or something of that nature. And so I was caught off guard by that a little bit, but Gengar doesn't really have a way to deal with Muck, and then he makes an error here, so he tries to counter. Uh, Unfortunately, if you're behind a substitute, counter and Mirror Coat both fail because the Pokemon itself did not actually take that direct damage. So it's essentially taken 0 damage from the attack, so it won't counter it back. It's a very easy mechanic to overlook. If you haven't tried it in practice before, it's not something you situationally prepare for all that often. So it's just a very easy thing he could have overlooked, and it's unfortunate for him because that was how he was deciding to try to address Muck. But I'm still wary of the fact that he might have a Destiny Bond on there as well, and so I'm trying to scout for that here. I'm going to Gunk Shot, even though it's less logical of a thing to do. It at least lets me confirm whether he was trying to Destiny Bond or not. And so when he tries to counter that, I know I have this Gengar dead to rights. It has no way to beat this Muck, and so it's just a really free chance for me to click Knockoff, remove the Muck, or I remove the Gengar. Gengar's out of play. So Muck gets rid of one of its biggest counters in an odd sense. And then Mew comes in. Again, I don't know what Mew's going to do, so my best decision at this point is to just try to knock it off, fish for the Poison Touch poison, and then try to whittle it down so that it doesn't have a chance to take off and do anything oppressive. And so, very fortunately, his Will-O-Wisp misses, so this seems like it was more of a support Mew. Knockoff gets the poison. I'm not affected by Synchronize because I'm a poison type. Mew loses its leftovers, and then Mew is now pretty much useless. And I don't want to get poisoned at this or burned at this point in time, so I'm gonna hard switch out to Shaymin because I don't want to be poisoned because I still want to have a really strong way of dealing with Clefable in the late game, and Muck still remains that answer. So there's no reason for me to take an unnecessary burn here when I know Mew is already on the outs. It might stealth rock there, but I don't want to risk taking a Will-O-Wisp. I got lucky the first one didn't hit. RNG has been really favorable to me in this match already because the gunk shot I missed earlier was to my favor because he would have just countered that and did some decent damage back to me. So I got to avoid that as well. And so I'm going to take my win on that and not push my luck. And so I'm going to come in with Shaymin here. He's going to Will-O-Wisp again, another miss. Unfortunate for him, not a big deal for me. I'm special attacking. I am natural cure, so I don't really care about that. I air slash here just because I don't want to seed flare and give him a window to come in with Heracross. So air slash was going to be enough to kill Mew. But if I kill Mew with Seed Flare, then if he suspects I'm Choice Lock for any reason, he gets a free entry with Heracross to do damage. So I want to go Air Slash. And then if he comes with anything else, I can react. But if Mew goes down, then he can't come in with Heracross. And so that's the big thing here is I don't want to create windows for Heracross to be oppressive. So I'm going to make sure I'm using attacks, especially when I'm Choice Lock, using attacks that will prevent him from coming in. And so I go for Air Slash. It does virtually nothing, which tells me this is Assault Vest. So now I know that information. I don't need to be overly worried about what the Komala is going to do other than just being a special wall to prevent some of my sweeps with Diancie or Dracopult. So I'm going to go force myself to get a layer of spikes down. Why not? To my advantage. Come back in with Shaymin because it's a really favorable matchup. I don't care about burn. I don't care about toxic all that much because, again, natural cure. And then I'm in a position to just start spamming Seed Flare because if he can't avoid the attack, everything starts breaking. Komala takes 39%, so now it's in range for Seed Flare to come in again, get the KO. So that annihilates it. He comes in with Clefable. Caught me a little bit by surprise that the Clefable ended up being the unaware set, just because I had been hazard stacking in weeks past. I'd thrown a lot of hazards up in my week 2 match, so I thought Clefable would want to make sure that it wasn't taking unnecessary hazard damage, and so I just assumed it would be the unaware set. Not the unaware set, the magic guard set, because I also hadn't set up any sweepers. The most I had done was have Diancie click rock polish. That's nothing Mew being unaware helps protect against, and so it just seemed like a more logical thing for him to do to run magic guard. I see it's unaware, so I'm really happy I'm on the field with Shaymin right now because Shaymin can break this before it has a chance to do anything. And so the Seed Flare is going to do 70%, get that Spadef drop. He's going to do a Moonblast. He's going to get the special attack drop. I don't really care at this point. I'm just spamming attacks until I go down because Shaymin's basically broken all the things it needs to break except for Milotic. So I'm still maybe wanting to keep it alive for Milotic, but I'm not too worried. And then Milotic comes in, which again is great news for me. I'm just going to keep spamming. No reason not to keep Seed Flaring here. Just keep going for drops and just keep breaking things with damage. Milotic is down to 16%. I don't need Shaymin for anything else at this point. Shaymin has now broken the one piece it needs to break, and this Milotic is no longer a concern for me. So I can just continue to Seed Flare. If I miss, I miss, but I'm just going to keep spamming it until I go down. And so then once that's down, this game is essentially on the back end. Heracross comes in here basically because it has to at this point. I have no incentive to switch out to anything else because I know for a fact Moonblast is going to, from my Diancie, will KO this Heracross after it megas. So I don't need to do anything wild here. I just need to let it attack, KO Shaymin, and then I come in with Diancie and start clicking Moonblast until the game is over. Just because there's no incentive to risk anything. I want to make sure it's taking damage this whole time and being pressured so that it just doesn't have a chance to set up or do anything wild. And then now with the Spadef drop from using close combat, Mega Dynasty has just a really free entry here. I outspeeded it easily. I click Moonblast easily. It goes straight down. It's out of play. And all that he has left now is the Mew, which is going to be at like 2% health because of spikes. And so it's just, again, another free Moonblast because I am EV to outspeed a Mew. And so that's that. Most of this game was won on Shaymin just spamming buttons, but I did take a lot of caution in the early game, specifically against the Gengar, to make sure I wasn't at risk of losing a piece early this time, because the Sash counter caught me off guard last week, and I got punished hard for that, and then that threw off my game a little bit. So I knew going in Gengar was a concern for its ability to do that with Destiny Bond, I mean, I guess it had counter as an option too. So I was just trying to carefully remove that piece and then make sure I wasn't leaving windows for Heracross to come in. He did have a window after Muck KO'd the Gengar to come in with the Heracross. He could have taken advantage of that more. I still was in a position and in full control of the game at that point where I could have sent in Skarmory. Skarmory comes in, absorbs a hit. If it's enough where I'm out of 2-hit KO range, I just start roosting. So I wasn't too worried about that Heracross, but it was on my mind as something that could start breaking pieces of my team open if I wasn't careful. But I was generally able to keep it out of play until a point in the game where it didn't matter and that Diancie was just free to revenge kill without concern. And so, yeah, that's that. Mega Diancie, I think, is currently co-tied in the league for most KOs, or co-leads the league with the most KOs at 11 now, but it has not fainted, so it's good on Diancie. Dragapult once again sits the bench, so he's came every week. He's only come out of his Pokeball once. We will see if he gets a chance next week to see some more action. But I will be back in week 5 with my next match recap.